Imagine waking up as a 6-inch cylinder of beeswax in the most opulent, over-decorated fire hazard of the 17th century. Louis XIV's palace at Versailles. You won't speak, you won't walk, but you will slowly melt to death while illuminating powdered aristocrats with questionable hygiene. Your reward? A smoky sniff from a bored duchess, and an early extinguishment by a servant who hates his life. Welcome to the forgotten life of a palace candle, the unsung hero of fashionably dim conversations, romantic scandals, and royal indigestion. This is your life now, and no, there's no union for candles. If you enjoy slow-burning tales of waxy despair, historical absurdity, and royal nonsense, dim the lights, hit that subscribe button, and let your brain flicker into dreamlike curiosity. Before you grace the mirrored halls of Versailles, before your waxy body lit up the flushed faces of powdered nobility and witnessed more scandals than a 21st century group chat, you were bee vomit. Yes, let's not romanticize things just yet. You began your glorious aristocratic journey in the digestive tract of an overworked honeybee. A worker, of course. The drone club. Thousands of them buzzed around in a field outside Lyon, unaware that their tiny bodies were being subcontracted by fate to serve a monarchy whose concept of gratitude involved guillotining dissenters. Your first form, a hexagonal prison, neatly stored in a wax comb like a spreadsheet cell filled with ambition and enzymes. This wasn't luxury. This was industrial-grade sweatshop labor, nature's version. If bees could unionize, you wouldn't exist. But lucky you were scraped from the comb by a leathery-handed beekeeper named Gerard. He wore one glove, smelled faintly of burnt onions, and cursed like he was paid by the syllable. He muttered to himself as he melted down your honeycomb brethren in a bubbling vat, probably wondering how this sticky side hustle somehow became his entire personality. Gerard didn't believe in luck, but he did believe in beeswax. And you were the good kind. No tallow, no cow fat. You were high-end, pure, fit for the sacred light of royalty, or at least their underpaid furniture dusters. After being sieved, boiled, and blessed with a dash of pine resin for structure, you were poured into a pewter mold shaped like an elegant cylinder, the architectural equivalent of tall, pale, and emotionally unavailable. You solidified under a breeze coming through the workshop's cracked window. That breeze, by the way. First air you ever felt, and it was probably the cleanest, least judgmental wind you'd ever meet. Your wick was added by Gerard's son, a scrawny 12-year-old with hands stained yellow and dreams of becoming not a candle maker. He tied the thread tight, a tiny noose around your hypothetical dignity. Then, just like that, you were born. Wax and wick, a 6-inch symbol of elegance, fragility, and flammability. Congratulations. You were one of a set. 12 of you in a wooden box with velvet lining, because when you're shipping wax halfway across France to burn at a banquet, presentation matters. You sat quietly next to your siblings, eavesdropping on Gerard's muttering about a rush order for Versailles. Versailles, the palace, as in chandeliers the size of livestock, hallways that echo forever, and bathrooms located a 6-minute walk from the nearest gold-encrusted chamber pot. Gerard packed you like porcelain. A miracle, given that last week he dropped a crate of soap into a well and blamed the weather. Your journey would be long, winding, and riddled with the smell of horse sweat and aristocratic paperwork. You were loaded onto a cart next to a barrel of dried lavender, 2 crates of silverware, and a taxidermy fox that no one had the courage to remove. Now, let's pause. You're probably thinking, why should I care about a candle? Why should I care about a literal stick of flammable wax doomed to melt into floorboard oblivion? Well, because that stick of wax was there. It lit treaties and tantrums, jewels and dinners, broken promises and powdered daydreams. It died slowly so others could shine. Sound familiar? Because maybe, just maybe, we're all a little waxy inside, burned out by expectations, flickering with purpose, silently illuminating things no one thanks us for. Too deep? Okay. Back to the car. The ride to Versailles was anything but elegant. Your crate rattled over cobblestones as the wheels hit potholes large enough to swallow dreams. Rain fell, mud splashed, a wheel broke near Fontainebleau, delaying the journey long enough for a highwayman to peer inside the crate, scoff and move on, as if even bandits had standards. You were insulted, but also relieved. You weren't ready to die in some roadside tavern. illuminating a game of cards between men with syphilis and zero impulse control. No. You were meant for something greater. As you arrived at the gates of Versailles, everything changed. Your crate was lifted, opened, sniffed by a steward who wore 3 rings and a perpetual frown. He approved you with a grunt, a royal grunt, if ever there was one. You were carried inside by a page boy with very clean shoes and very dead eyes, and that's when it hit you. The smell. Versailles didn't smell like royalty. It smelled like sweat, starch, roses, chamber pots, and regret. The halls were echo chambers of perfume and secrets, and you were about to become part of it all. But as you sat on a storage shelf near the Hall of Mirrors, something stirred inside you, or maybe it was just the temperature change. Either way, you couldn't help but wonder, do candles dream of electric sheep, or just of not dying in agony? Is the brief spark of relevance worth the slow, inevitable drip into nothingness? You didn't know, but you were about to find out. Because tomorrow, they light you. Versailles does not whisper wealth. It screams it in gold leaf, in chandeliers, in doors that serve no purpose except to remind you that you're not important enough to use them. The moment your crate was pried open in the belly of the palace, you got your first whiff of it. Not money exactly, but its bizarre, perfumed consequence. The air reeked of powder, pomade, and the collective denial of sanitation. And then, actual sunlight, bouncing violently off mirrors that stretched wall to wall, like the world's largest attempt at self-flattery. You had arrived in the most absurdly flammable building in Europe. The Hall of Mirrors, your new assignment, was less of a room, and more of a glowing fever dream. 79 paintings stared down from the ceiling. 17 enormous arched windows opened to gardens manicured like spreadsheets. And facing those windows, 17 mirrors, their frames dripping with gilt and gold. All this light, natural and artificial, bouncing endlessly, reflecting noble cheeks, powdered wigs, and the occasional confused pigeon that somehow got inside. And then there was you. You weren't even placed on a grand candelabrum at first. No, you were gently, but not too gently, dropped into a carved wall sconce, shaped like a cherub vomiting fruit. Classy. You weren't lit yet, just positioned, but you could already sense the danger. A breeze through a slightly ajar window could turn this place into a fireworks show, hosted by Satan. And here's the kicker. Versailles had no concept of fire safety. Not even a little. The closest thing to a sprinkler system was a servant with a wet cloth and anxiety. The drapes were flammable. The wigs were flammable. The guests? Mostly flammable, emotionally and chemically. And you, the literal fire risk, were going to be lit next to antique tapestries made of wool, silk, and delusion. Let that sink in. Of course, the building wasn't always this apocalyptic fantasy. It started as a humble hunting lodge. Then Louis XVI died, and his son Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, decided that humble was a disease. So he turned Versailles into the nerve center of a divine monarchy, a monument to personal branding centuries before Instagram existed. It was opulence weaponized. Versailles wasn't just a palace. It was propaganda with plumbing issues. And speaking of plumbing, it didn't have much. Toilets? Optional. Guests used chamber pots, or more often didn't. Courtiers would relieve themselves behind curtains, under staircases, or in fireplaces that hadn't been lit since January. Every hallway carried the subtle aroma of untreated ambition and digestive enthusiasm. And yet, despite the funk, everything sparkled, polished daily by servants who weren't allowed to make eye contact with the nobility unless directly addressed or on fire. You were now part of this world, and not just any part. You were lighting it. Eventually a steward with gloved hands and a nose tilted permanently upward entered your corner of the hall. He examined the candles. His approval was silent, the only kind of approval that mattered here. He gave a grunt, which was followed by 2 lackeys scrambling to rearrange the candelabra. Your waxy body was transferred to a more central position, higher up, in the middle of it all. Congratulations. You are now positioned to die in style. Let's take a moment to appreciate the absurdity. Versailles had over 3,000 candles burning on any given evening. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's documented fact. Lighting the place took an entire team of servants, known unofficially as les allumeurs, literally the lighters. They had long poles, ladders, and back problems. They'd work for hours preparing the glow for a dinner that might last 20 minutes, or until the king got bored and wandered off. Each candle, including you, was part of a choreography. A calculated glow, soft light for courtship, bright light for official declarations, moody flicker for when someone was about to be exiled for blinking wrong. You weren't ambiance, you were politics. Still unlit, you watched the room breathe in the mid-afternoon hush. The mirrors reflected each other infinitely, like Versailles was staring at itself and saying, "You are the moment." Somewhere below, a quartet tuned their violin. A servant dusted a bust of Apollo with a cloth so gentle it might as well have been an apology. Then, a cough. A noble woman, with eyebrows so finely plucked they looked accidental, entered the room, followed by a gentleman whose shoes were louder than his personality. They spoke in half-whispers, gossip disguised as philosophy. Their every movement aimed to be observed. They stood inches from you, casting their shadows on the wall. You weren't even burning yet, but already you were part of the performance. And that's the thing. Versailles wasn't about utility, it was about theatre. It was a palace pretending to be a planet, orbiting around the gravitational ego of one man. Every candle lit wasn't just about seeing, it was about being seen. Tomorrow, you'd burn. Tomorrow, you'd glow. For glory, for gossip, for gold. But today, you waited, poised, perfect. Surrounded by wealth, so concentrated it could cause moral vertigo. You were a flammable miracle in a temple of vanity, and your entire existence now depended on whether or not a passing courtier would sneeze too hard. Sleep time. There is no such thing as sleeping in when you're a candle at Versailles. You are not a guest. You are not a noble. You are a 6-inch, doomed to drip illuminator of early morning aristocratic rituals. Your job begins before the sun even considers showing up. At precisely 4:47 a.m. you are awoken rudely by the clatter of shoes on marble and the muttered cursing of a half-awake servant named Etienne. Etienne, whose soul left his body 3 jobs ago, carries the lighting rod like a medieval jouster resigned to his fate. He approaches you with a grunt, mumbles something unrepeatable about fire hazard and not paid enough, and strikes the flint with the dead-eyed precision of someone who no longer fears consequences. The spark crackles, the wick flares, and just like that, you're alive. It's not dramatic. There is no triumphant swell of music, no angelic choir, just heat. Immediate, intimate heat. Your body softens at the edges. You feel your own wax begin to shift, to surrender. It's like waking up and instantly realizing your job is to die slowly in public. But hey, that's showbiz. The palace creaks awake around you. The sounds are specific, chamber pots being emptied with resigned sloshing, powdered wigs being shaken like cursed snow globes, and servants whispering gossip louder than their footsteps. Outside, roosters announce the dawn like they invented it. Inside, your flame flickers to life in the half-dark, casting long shadows on gilded walls that have seen far worse than you. You illuminate the dull face of a marble bust. Some forgotten duke with eyes that scream, "I lost my fortune to velvet and bad decisions." Your glow hits the edge of a mirror, bouncing across the room in jittery reflections like a drunk firefly. Other candles join in, one by one, across the hallway, the salon, the outer chambers. A chorus of doomed wax, united in combustion. This is what Versailles looks like at 5 a.m. A glowing labyrinth of barely conscious servants trying to make 17th century splendor look effortless. And who are you lighting exactly? First, the hairdressers. Yes, plural, because one wig does not style itself. You shine down as Monsieur Armand, royal coiffeur and part-time alchemist. Constructs a powdered mountain atop a countess's head. He adds curls, feathers, decorative fruit, and something that may once have been a partridge. You watch as a candle near her left ear sputters nervously. You both know one bad turn of her head, and it's roast duchess for breakfast. Then come the dressers. Corsets are pulled. Stockings are tied. Perfumes are sprayed with the subtlety of a smoke bomb. You glow softly as a noble woman adjusts her posture, forcing her spine into a shape that would make chiropractors weep. She catches her reflection, frowns, and mutters something about how the lighting makes her look melancholy. You take it personally. By 6 a.m., you're sweating wax like an unpaid intern in a sauna. You've been burning for nearly an hour, and already your base is pooling gently, like you're trying to rejoin the floor. A servant rushes by, nearly knocking into your sconce. Your flame hiccups. You want to scream. You settle for flickering passive-aggressively. The Sun King has not yet risen. But make no mistake, the palace already orbits him. Staff glide through the corridors rehearsing the daily ballet of bootlicking. Courtiers line up outside the royal bedchamber like desperate contestants on a Baroque reality show. Who wants to hand the king his slippers? You're here for it all. You light the hallway where the Dauphin's tutor mutters his lesson plan under his breath. You flicker above a tray of breakfast pastries that no one will eat, but everyone will comment on. You dance beside a portrait of Louis XIV where he's depicted mid-pose, in armor, standing on a cloud, probably commanding a small country to kiss his feet. And then, the moment. At 7:30 a.m., the lever du roi begins. The royal rising. A highly choreographed ritual where the king is helped out of bed by 12 people, only 2 of whom are necessary, and all of whom act like it's an honor to help a man put on stockings. Your light reflects in the polished silver basin as the king washes his face, his wig is adjusted, his nightshirt is removed with the reverence typically reserved for relics. You burn brightly from a wall sconce near the fireplace, where no fire burns because the temperature is regulated by mood, not logic. No one acknowledges you, but you see it all. You watch as the king glances toward the window, not to check the weather, but to let the sun know who's in charge. You flicker as courtiers murmur, compliments with the desperation of men who haven't felt joy since their 3rd fencing lesson. One noble says your flame is steady, noble. Another comments that the light feels pure. They're clearly projecting, and then it's over. The king stands. His heels click once on the polished floor. The audience disperses like smoke, perfumed, powdered smoke, and you remain behind. Still burning, still dripping, still unnoticed. Let that sink in. You were the first thing awake, and the last thing anyone sees. You lit the morning with no thanks, no applause. Your reward? Being 1 inch shorter, and 1 step closer to obsolescence. But hey, at least you weren't the candle that got knocked over during the dressing of the Duchess of Maine. That one went out mid-curtsy, and was immediately replaced. Brute. By the time breakfast begins, you've already been dying for hours. The Hall of Mirrors is now fully awake, and so are the people inside it, though awake might be a generous term for anyone functioning purely on ego and eau de toilette. The king is about to eat, and because this is 17th century France, that means half the known universe is invited to watch. This, believe it or not, is the Grand Couvert, a sacred ritual where the monarch eats in public while everyone else stands around pretending it's not weird. Dozens of courtiers file into the breakfast room with the solemnity of a funeral procession, except with more ruffles and less sincerity. They gather silently around a table, laid out like a still life painting sponsored by Gout. And there you are, flickering gently in a silver wall sconce, half melted already. Your wax base now a gooey suggestion of your former self. You cast golden light across the king's breakfast spread. Broth, stewed meats, warm breads, candied fruit, and a bowl of hot chocolate thick enough to qualify as a choking hazard. None of it is for you, of course. You're here to make it look appetizing, to give every slice of pear and every puddle of jam a seductive shimmer of royal-approved lighting. And let's talk about King Louis XIV, shall we? The man who calls himself the Sun King, a nickname he gave himself, by the way, enters the room like it's a stage, and he's the only actor allowed to speak. He wears red-heeled shoes, which means power. He wears lace cuffs the size of tea towels, which means confident. He wears a face that hasn't smiled in 12 years, which means he's very, very full of himself. Louis sits. The courtiers murmur admiration, even though he has done nothing except bend his knees. A servant brings him a napkin, like it's the Ark of the Covenant. Another uncovers a silver dome with the flourish of a magician, revealing a steaming bowl of bouillon. You flicker politely. It's quiet. Too quiet. The only sounds are the clink of silverware and the subtle wheezing of an aging marquis, attempting to remain upright. The king eats slowly, deliberately, as if tasting food is a political act. Which, in Versailles, it is. And here's the kicker. Everyone acts like this is fascinating. You can't look away, not because it's riveting, but because you literally can't look anywhere else. Your flame is trained directly at the royal nose. You watch as Louis spoons up his soup and lets it linger in his mouth like he's evaluating it for theological implications. Somewhere behind him, a duchess faints in admiration, or possibly from hunger. Hard to say. Suddenly, a commotion. A footman reaches too far across the table, trying to fetch a baguette that is, quite honestly, not worth the trouble. His elbow brushes your sconce. You wobble, you flicker, time slow. For one breathless second, you imagine yourself falling, crashing to the floor, igniting a lace tablecloth, becoming a flaming symbol of breakfast rebellion. But no, he catches himself. You survive. Barely. You drip in protest. A glob of wax falls like a single, quiet tear onto the silver tray below. No one notices. Of course they don't. Your suffering is ambient. Part of the decor. You are literally burning alive for the aesthetic of a man eating soup, while 40 people pretend he's a prophet. And then, something unexpected. Louis looks up. He sees you. Or, more accurately, he sees the glow you're casting on his goblet. He nods, approvingly, just once, and then turns back to his sausage like nothing happened. Was it gratitude? Recognition? Or just an involuntary neck twitch? Doesn't matter. You felt it. That tiny, flickering moment of royal acknowledgement. You'll carry it until your wick gives out, which, by the way, is happening faster than you'd hoped. You've got maybe 4 inches of functional life left, and the smell of melting wax is starting to edge into noticeable. Across the room, 2 younger nobles argue over who gets to hold the king's spoon next. Yes, that's a real job. Premier écuyer de la cuillère, the first squire of the spoon. You glow brighter out of pity. And just when you think the absurdity has peaked, a dwarf jester in harlequin tights enters with a tray of napkins shaped like swans. No one bats an eye. Versailles is like that. A place where everything is ridiculous, and nothing is surprising. Eventually the king dabs the corners of his mouth with a lace kerchief that costs more than most people's farms, and stands. A ripple of movement follows. Chairs scrape. People bow so hard they might detach vertebrae. You try not to drip on anything historically significant. The breakfast is over. The table is cleared with mechanical grace. Crumbs are brushed. Plates vanish. A footman reaches for you. For a terrifying second you think you're about to be extinguished. Swapped out for a taller, fresher candle like some wax-based Marie Antoinette. But no, he hesitates. Then moves on. You remain. Barely. 1 inch shorter. 1 moment closer to irrelevance. But still here, still burning, still glowing for people who think illumination is their birthright. And sure, the king may never look at you again, but he did once, and that's enough to keep your flame alive. For now. By midday, your wick is a little shorter, your base a little slouchier, and your sense of dignity, well, that dripped off somewhere around the Marquise de Montpensier's third sigh. You are now part of what can only be described as Versailles' favourite blood sport, gossip. Not chess, not fencing, gossip, not whispered like a guilty secret, but delivered with all the elegance of a declaration of war, just quieter, and preferably by candlelight. You are placed in a drawing room. The walls are upholstered in silk, the chairs are so ornate they double as torture devices, and a string quartet outside the door is softly attempting to pretend they're not being ignored. In the centre of the room sits a small circle of ladies with names longer than your wick and petticoats so wide they could serve as temporary housing for small livestock. Their conversation? Knife sharp. Lady A leans in and says the Duchesse d'Orléans wore last year's velvet to this year's opera. The gasp that follows could have extinguished you. Lady B claims the Comte de Charolais fainted during confession, again, and this time not from guilt, but from tight breeches. Lady C counters with a tidbit about a certain marquis who was seen emerging from the Queen's maid's closet at a highly unmathematical hour. And through it all, you burn. You light their powdered faces, catching every smirk, every flicked fan, every eyebrow raised like a guillotine on standby. Your flame, though small, gives drama the stage lighting it deserves. Let's be clear, Versailles is not powered by honesty. It's powered by secrets, side-eyes, and subtle threats disguised as compliments. Your hair looks divine, says one lady to another, so much braver to wear it unfashionably short. A beat. A sip of tea, the execution complete. As you flicker in your gold-plated sconce, the room shifts in temperature. Not literally. The windows haven't opened since Louis was a teenager. But socially, the Duchesse de la Vallière enters, late, on purpose. She floats in with the certainty of someone who knows she was just being talked about, her smile, weaponized. Her dress, crimson, a color chosen specifically to offend someone in the room who wore plum. She takes a seat, nods at you like she invented candlelight, and begins peeling a grape with a tiny knife that absolutely has stabbed a rival's ego before. You drip quietly. No applause. Outside, the wind sighs against the shutters. Inside, tension builds. A lady in waiting says something about the Dauphine's new hairpiece being avant-garde, which is Versailles code for someone should be exiled for that. Laughter ripples like silk unraveling. You catch a brief flash of teeth, a smile not meant for warmth but for dominance. And here's the thing, gossip here isn't just entertainment, it's survival. At court, reputations can be unmade before lunch. One misplaced word, one false friend, one badly lit pimple in the wrong ballroom. Poof. Social execution. The only difference between a noblewoman and a candle is that she gets extinguished by whispers instead of a snuffer. You watch as Lady B shifts in her chair and drops a handkerchief that isn't hers. Scandal? Flirtation? Amateur espionage? You'll never know. You're a candle, after all. You illuminate everything and understand nothing. You're the therapist who can't talk back, the witness who can never testify. The silence of wax is respected here. Then, a lull. A moment of quiet. A reflective. One of the younger ladies, no older than 17 and barely taller than a soup ladle, looks into your flame, not past you, into you. Her eyes are soft, tired, maybe. You flicker gently, not out of obligation, but something closer to sympathy. She says nothing, just stares. Let that sink in. Even in this palace of theatrics there are cracks in the mask. Quiet griefs. Little sighs. The court may sparkle with snide laughter, but some of these women are exhausted. From marriage, from expectation, from corsets that could strangle ambition. You light their faces, but not their truths. Still, the silence is brief. The mood snaps back. Someone mentions a letter found in the wrong pocket. The Queen's apothecary has been seen smiling too much. The stable boy is too handsome for his job, which, in Versailles logic, means he's definitely up to something. You, of course, are melting through all of it. The base of your wax body has begun to form a shallow pool on the bronze sconce beneath you, a tiny moat of your own essence. It's oddly poetic if you're into that sort of thing. Death by illumination, martyrdom via ambiance. The ladies rise. Tea is finished. The room will be cleaned, the air perfumed, the curtains straightened. Everything reset, repainted, and repeated again tomorrow. The gossip, however, that stays. It clings to the walls like perfume in old upholstery. You are the only one who will remember what was really said, what was meant. But you won't speak of it, you can't, because you, poor waxy soul, were never meant to talk, only to burn. And burn you do. They call Versailles a palace, a symbol of civilization, a glittering beacon of refinement. But that's only because you don't see who's holding up the mirrors. By the time dusk creeps in like a nosy aunt, the nobles retreat to their rooms to repowder their faces, adjust their egos, and rehearse their flirtations. But the real show? That begins with the servants, specifically your people, the candle crew. They arrive in silence, as if summoned by invisible trumpets. There are dozens of them, dressed in livery designed to look noble, which mostly functions as camouflage to hide the fact that they're human fire extinguishers. They carry tools, snuffers, trimmers, poles, fresh candles, and the weary resignation of those born into someone else's fantasy. You are inspected first. The tall, gaunt servant, named Claude, peers at your wick like it personally insulted him. He mutters something about burning too fast and lasts shorter than the Dauphin's attention span. Claude trims you with a tiny soot-blackened scissors, a snip so clean it feels like a guillotine for your self-esteem. Welcome to maintenance. See, the illusion of Versailles depends entirely on invisible effort. Candles don't just glow. They are cleaned, rotated, replaced, and occasionally cursed at. Wax drippings are scraped off the furniture with the delicacy of a museum conservator performing surgery on a priceless relic. The goal? Make it all look effortless, as if light simply appears because the nobility wills it. But here's what really happens. Behind every golden sconce, there's someone like Pierre. Pierre is short, slope-shouldered, and climbs ladders the way some people say prayers, with caution and mild panic. He's 17, maybe 18. with the face of someone who has seen too many ceilings and not enough sun. Pierre talks to you when no one's watching. He doesn't speak like a poet. He mumbles, mostly. Little updates about his sore knee, complaints about his supervisor, dreams about leaving Versailles and becoming a sailor, even though he's never been on a boat and gets dizzy near puddles. You listen, because what else can you do? Sometimes, Pierre cleans the soot off your sconce with a cloth that was once white, but now looks like a historical document. He apologizes when he bumps you. He swears under his breath when the wax on the floor hardens faster than he can scrape it. One time, he dropped a fresh candle and accidentally stepped on it. He stared at the crushed wax for a full minute like it had insulted his family, then pocketed it and walked away. That crushed candle was your cousin. You try not to think about it. The truth is, Versailles eats people like Pierre. The nobility might glide through gilded halls, but the labourers, they climb, carry, clean, and disappear. Their hands blister, their backs crack, they are ghosts in uniform, paid in coins barely heavy enough to jingle, and yet, without them, nothing shines. Not a mirror, not a portrait, not a single smug chandelier. Let that sink in. Tonight, the candles are being doubled. A diplomatic dinner. Some duke from Savoy or Saxony, it's hard to keep track, is arriving, and the palace must look as if it invented illumination. You are one of hundreds being prepared, polished, straightened. Pierre holds you up to eye level. He doesn't say anything this time. He just looks at you, and in that moment, something curious happens. You almost feel it's brief. He blinks, mutters about your good symmetry, and secures you into the newly cleaned candelabrum shaped like a triumphant griffin. You are elevated now, literally, from wall sconce to centerpiece. Status upgrade, probably temporary, but still you feel the shift. Other servants bustle past. One woman hauls a crate of fresh beeswax tapers, arms trembling but determined not to drop them. Another young man relights sconces with a long pole and a fireproof glove that looks like it was made by someone who hated hands. The supervisor barks orders about spacing, pacing, and optical harmony, which is a fancy way of saying, make it look expensive. They speak in half whispers, mindful of echoing down the marble corridors, because at Versailles, even the air is listening, and no one wants to be heard saying the king's dining room smells like melted livestock. As you burn, you think of Pierre's hands, calloused, careful, human. He is the reason you shine safely, the reason you haven't fallen, the reason you haven't been scraped off the parquet floor and melted into a novelty taper shaped like a mythical cherub's behind. And yet, he will never sit at the table, never walk down the hall of mirrors unless he's cleaning footprints, never be praised for trimming a wick with precision that saved a duchess's sleeves from an unexpected inferno. No one applauds the candle servants, but you will remember them. When the heat builds, and your flame sputters from overuse, when the mirrors reflect not nobility but sweat, when the air feels thick with wax and effort, you'll remember who held the ladder, who caught you when you slid sideways, who wiped you clean when no one was looking, and you'll burn a little brighter, quietly, for them. No one warned you about the heat. By midday, the Hall of Mirrors becomes less of a room and more of a lightly gilded furnace. The summer sun, now fully awake and strutting through the heavens like it too, believes itself to be king, pours in through 17 arched windows. The light collides with the mirrors, rebounds, ricochets, and slams into you, again and again, like a cosmic prank. The result? Versailles turns into a 700,000 square foot convection oven with wigs. And you start to sweat. Not metaphorically. Literally. Your wax, once firm and sculpted with purpose, begins to soften. A sheen forms along your curves. A drop breaks loose. It rolls slowly, almost dramatically, before plopping onto the metal dish below you with a sound no one hears. But you feel it. You feel every drop. This isn't just melting, it's a kind of aristocratic liquefaction. A slow, deliberate demise, sponsored by sunlight and monarchy. Let's pause a moment here. You were designed to burn, yes, but not like this. Not in broad daylight. Not while simmering in your own golden sweat like a candle-shaped fondue. You were made for ambiance, not broiling in a solar labyrinth while noblemen in brocade complain about soup temperature. Speaking of which, the soup is late, Again. The courtiers fidget like decorative pigeons. Everyone's overdressed and underfed. The heat clings to their silk and satin like guilt. Powdered wigs have begun to wilt. The Duc de Noailles discreetly wipes his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief, and prays no one notices the salt streaks. You catch a glimpse of a lady's fan beating the air with the desperation of someone who regrets choosing velvet in July. The harpsichordist is sweating through his cravat. The steward is sweating through his speech. And dog, possibly the Queen's, possibly a nobleman's emotional support animal, lies motionless near a pillar, eyes half closed, dreaming of a pond that doesn't exist. And through it all, you... Oh, how you burn! The combination of sunlight and flame has turned you into a shimmering pillar of resignation. Wax trails spiral down your body like the world's saddest ice cream cone. You're drooping now, slightly, but undeniably. Your posture, once proud, has taken on a certain slope, a weary lean. You are no longer the straight-backed illuminator of Versailles. You are the visual embodiment of someone who's just been told their soufflé has collapsed. A whisper reaches your wick. She's fainted, someone says, as a countess slides gently off her chair and onto the parquet floor like an expensive curtain being lowered. There's no scream, just a coordinated gasp, and a dozen men scrambling to not be the first to help her. It's too hot to be heroic. One of the musicians stops playing mid-chord and begins quietly hallucinating about rain. You think you hear the steward mutter something about heat stroke, but he says it in Latin, because it sounds fancier that way. The room is thick now, not just with heat, but with unspoken suffering. And you start to wonder, is this all there is? To melt in plain view? To give light while losing yourself? To drip invisibly while everyone else just wipes their foreheads and moves on? Let that sink in, like wax into wood grain. You don't have the luxury of protest. No strike, no shade, just slow decline in the service of decor. You were not designed for drama, but here you are, dissolving with dignity, while aristocrats argue about whether cherries are too common for dessert. You blink, or rather you flicker, and notice your neighbour has leaned into you. She's a tapered column, elegant, slightly taller, now listing gently in your direction like a drunk ballerina. The heat has robbed her of structure. She seems embarrassed. You glow faintly in acknowledgement. She doesn't respond. She's too soft now to hold opinions. You are both melting metaphors now. And then someone yells about soup. It's the chef. He's arrived from the kitchen, red-faced, wheezing, holding a tureen like it contains the Declaration of Independence. The potager is not late, he insists, breathless. It is perfectly on time. The noble palate must wait for perfection. He sets the soup down with a flourish, and almost knocks a tray of silver spoons onto the floor. You flinch. The nobles clap politely, as if they're trying to encourage a child who's fallen off a horse but is pretending it was on purpose. Your flame flutters in the movement. You're startled, not by the soup, but by the realization that you're half your size now. Your base is 1/3 puddle. Your future? Probably scraped up by Pierre, repoured into something vaguely cherubic, and reused to light a hallway no one walks down. But for now, you endure. The nobles ladle the soup, sip, pretend to enjoy it. No one finishes. The conversation turns to garden renovations, diplomatic rumours, and whether satin is out this season. You cast a shaky glow on a goblet of watered wine and think about the bees that birthed you. Tiny, furious, efficient. You wonder if they'd approve of this end. Probably not. Then the sun shifts. Just slightly. Just enough for one beam to lift off your waxy torso. The heat relents. Barely. You exhale in the form of a quieter flame. The worst of the midday melting is over, for now, but the drip remains. Soft, relentless, almost meditative. You are melting, yes, but also shining. And in Versailles, that's basically the same thing. Afternoon at Versailles. The hour when ambition begins to sweat through brocade, and everyone gets just a little more irritable. The hall's quiet, the music dims, and somewhere a maid sobs into a drawer of unfolded gloves. This is when the royal family argues. Not publicly, of course. And that would be unseemly. No, they save their theatrics for small salons, where the walls are silk, the chairs are velvet, and the furniture is so expensive no one actually sits on it. These rooms are the royal equivalent of a padded cell, and today, you've been placed smack in the middle of one. Your flame, though weakened by earlier melting, flickers on as the Sun King himself enters. Louis XIV, sovereign of France, absolute monarch, full-time icon of self-worship. He is followed by his cousin Philippe, the Duke of Orleans, who manages to look both fashionable and furious. No small feat, considering his shoes have heels higher than most career expectations. They begin civilly enough, a discussion apparently about court protocol, or maybe inheritance, or someone's new opera. It's hard to tell. You don't speak French. You speak fire, and in the language of flame, what they're doing is heating up. You cast light on their powdered faces, catching the glint in their eyes and the tremble in their lips. Philippe gestures broadly. Louis narrows his gaze. There's talk of betrayal, of favoritism, of someone being excluded from an upcoming council meeting. The word indignity is thrown around with the theatrical flair of a dropped fan. Then Philippe raises his voice. Not a yell. That would be crass. More of a sharp projection, the kind that makes marble statues recoil slightly. He accuses the king of undermining his influence, of publicly slighting him in front of the court. Louis responds with a silence so cutting it could trim a candle wick at 20 paces. You drip steadily unnoticed. Let's pause. You are the only witness here. No scribes, no attendants. Just you, a slowly dying cylinder of wax, holding space for the unraveling of royal restraint. You illuminate every flared nostril, every insult disguised as etiquette, every clenched jaw pretending to yawn. Philippe's hand slams against a side table. Not hard. Just enough for emphasis. The candelabrum beside you shudders. You wobble slightly. Your flame stutters. One more gust and you're out. But they don't notice. They're too consumed by their performance. This is what power looks like up close. Petty, polished, and deeply insecure. Louis speaks again. He reminds Philippe, gently, icily, that the crown does not consult the mirror before it shines. That proximity is not permission. That Versailles has one sun, and Philippe should be grateful for the light he receives. You think about how that light is actually you. Philippe storms out. His heels clack in fury. His cape flutters like a disgraced peacock. A footman waiting in the hallway scurries backward in fear of catching secondary shame. The door closes with a velvet thud. Silence returns. Louis exhales. He doesn't sigh. Kings don't sigh. He releases presence. He sits down in an armchair no one has dared to occupy since its carving. He looks toward the window, then at you. Yes, you. For a moment, you meet his gaze. Your flame flickers. He stares. Is he thinking, reflecting, or just wondering why the room suddenly smells like scorched beeswax? He blinks, looks away, reaches for a letter, reads. The drama's over. The crown remains unshaken, but beneath it, perhaps the man is tired. You continue to burn. Outside, the day softens. Clouds drift in. The palace shifts into its evening gears. Servants prepare new uniforms. Chamber pots are discreetly emptied. Harpsichords are retuned. No one will mention the argument. Not out loud, but by dinner, everyone will know. Versailles leaks secrets like a colander made of lace. But not from you. You hold the scene in silence. A flame's eye view of royal fracture. You are the keeper of what was said, and what wasn't, of the almost tears, of the final glare, of the small, unmistakable sound, of a man trying not to lose face, a waxy witness. Eventually, a servant enters. Doesn't knock, just glides in like regret. He glances at you, reaches for the snuffer, but stops. Your flame is still steady, still dignified, somehow, still appropriate. He lets you burn. The room darkens gently as the sky turns grey. You cast your last light on the chair Louis vacated. It still holds his shape, his weight, his worry. You wonder, if a candle lights a royal argument, and no one else is in the room, does it count? Yes, because you were there. And now, you flicker on. It begins with a smell, not a strong one. Just off. A faint whiff of something animal, earthy, slightly greasy, like someone tried to roast a stew inside an old boot. You notice it during a quiet shift in the corridor, a time when no one important is around, and the only sounds are the distant yawn of a yawning footman, and the unsettling squeak of shoes that haven't seen polish since last Tuesday. You flicker peacefully, minding your own beeswax. Then it wafts in, burnt, meaty, raw. You recoil. Or you would, if you had muscles. Instead, your flame just wobbles slightly, as if you've heard something scandalous but are trying to remain composed. The odour deepens. It's not you, it's not your fellow beeswax candle on the opposite sconce. A noble taper with a respectable pedigree and minimal drip. No. This is tallow. Yes, tallow. The word hits you like soot in the lungs. Animal fat. The lowest of the low. The wax of peasants and taverns. Tallow candles stink. They sputter. They sweat. They don't glow. They ooze light. Reluctantly. Like an apology for existing. And worst of all, they're cheap. The conspiracy begins there. Whispers among the servants. Supplies, arriving in unmarked crates. Candles that smell like boiled mutton, replacing dignified beeswax in lesser-used chambers. First, the servants' hall, then a side corridor, then the antechamber to the Marquis de Louvois' office. And that's where it starts to spread. You're moved, temporarily, to a minor salon, where courtiers gather to rehearse flattery, and likely insult each other's children. That's when you see it. Sitting atop a wall bracket shaped like a sad lion. A tallow candle. It's trying to blend in, of course. Trimmed neatly, painted with a thin coat of fake gold dust, to appear more court-appropriate. But you can smell it. That faint tang of bovine despair. The telltale yellowish hue of economic compromise. You burn brighter in protest. The tallow candle flickers lazily beside you, oblivious, or pretending to be. It tilts slightly to the left, as if to say, "What? I belong here too." You drip with barely restrained disgust. Your wax forms a perfectly symmetrical pool, while its base bulges like a forgotten meatball. The disrespect. What's worse? No one seems to care. The nobles lounge, sip, and gossip, utterly blind to the olfactory crime occurring just feet away. A lady compliments the room's soft glow, completely unaware that she is basking in budget lighting. Another fans herself and says the ambience is divine. You want to scream, but again, no vocal cords. Later, back in the storage room, you begin to piece it together. Pierre enters, carrying a small crate. He sets it down gently, but not reverently, not the way he handled your box. He opens it. Inside, rows of stubby, greasy imposters. Tallow, plain and sad, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string. He sighs, pulls one out, lights it, watches the flame stutter. They're replacing half the salon stock. He mutters. Your flame nearly extinguishes from shock. It's a cost-cutting measure, apparently. The war has drained resources. The king wants more soldiers, more cannons, more powdered musicians to march behind the cannons. Beeswax is expensive. Tallow is functional. Functional. That word should be exiled. So now, Versailles, the symbol of divine monarchy, the palace of endless mirrors and thousand-plate feasts, is turning to animal fat to illuminate its secrets. The irony practically drips from your wick. You begin to see it everywhere. Side tables hosting suspiciously lumpy candles, ballrooms faintly reeking of stew, a faint trail of soot beneath a golden chandelier. One night, you spot a valet scraping a tallow smear off a painting of Louis himself. The ultimate insult, lighting the Sun King with beef byproduct. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a cultural shift. Servants start whispering about efficiency. The steward defends the tallow by saying, "The king's not going to personally sniff every corridor." You'd roll your eyes if you had them. Instead you burn hotter. You burn in protest. You glow with righteous, waxy fury. But you know what's worst? Some nobles prefer them. You hear it during a soiree. They give a warmer glow, one duchess says, nose tilted upward like she invented candlelight. Less sharp, more intimate, another nods. More natural. More natural? You are handcrafted from bee secretion and forest resin. That's nature. This fat log, is what's left after soup. You feel a cold drip slide down your side. Is this how it ends? Not with a snuff, but with slow replacement? Quiet erosion? The noble beeswax candle, faded into memory while Versailles slowly marinates in the smell of economy. You're not alone in your paranoia. Other candles, those still blessed with prime placement, flicker in odd rhythms. It's unspoken, but it's there. a tension in the flames, an understanding. The palace is changing. The light, once pure and perfumed, is now mixed, polluted, diluted, and still, no one sees. Only you. Only the wax. Only the ones who burn for them. So you resolve to shine harder, straighter, cleaner, because if this is your final century, you're not going out smelling like stew. Night has fallen, and with it comes the grandest illusion of them all, the masquerade ball. This is not a party. This is Versailles in full performance mode. A spectacle of satin, secrets, and several fire hazards dressed in couture. You, of course, are at the center of it, perched atop a golden candelabrum sculpted to resemble a cherub caught mid-yoga, its tiny arms outstretched in eternal discomfort, barely supporting the full weight of your waxy existence. You've been buffed, trimmed, relit, and positioned just so, casting the perfect amber glow over the proceedings below. Every flicker is theatrical. Every drip, choreographed. Your flame dances in tandem with powdered wigs and whispered scandals, each movement carefully orchestrated to distract from the fact that half the people here are lying to each other. Welcome to court. The room pulses with opulence. Mirrors double the splendor, multiplying every sparkle until your senses are buried in gold, silk, and string quartets playing music no one's really listening to. The guests? Peacocks in disguise? Gowns with enough fabric to cover an acre, masks adorned with feathers, gems, and in one case what appears to be a taxidermied songbird. It's hard to tell who's who, which is the point. That's the appeal of a masquerade. To be someone else, just for a night. To hide in plain sight while saying exactly what you mean, because no one knows it's you. Faces are obscured, names forgotten, but secrets? Those come out like wine from an overfilled goblet. Speaking of which, there is wine. Everywhere. It flows in rivers from crystal decanters, staining lace cuffs and logic alike. A countess sips champagne while laughing at something no one said. A marquis stares too long at a lady whose mask covers more ambition than cheekbone. Somewhere, a minor noble attempts to court a duchess with the grace of a damp napkin. And above it all, you burn, not from joy, not from excitement, but because you were designed to, and tonight, that purpose feels particularly precarious. Because here's what no one says out loud at a masquerade. Everything is flammable. The masks, the wigs, the dresses, the curtains, the powdered nobility, the drunken flirtation, the casual disregard for spatial awareness. You, the literal open flame on a centerpiece, are surrounded by thousands of francs worth of human kindling. Let that sink in. You do your best to remain calm, steady, regal. You remember your training, the melting, the glowing, the dignified dripping, but the tension in the room is thick. Not with suspense, with fabric. A lady in blue walks by, her sleeves brushed dangerously close to your flame. You flinch. Her perfume, rose water and something vaguely volatile, clings to the air. You imagine the headlines, tragedy at Versailles, Duchess ignites while complimenting marzipan. Below, the orchestra swells. A minuet begins. The dancers float into position, moving like ghosts on silk. Every step is rehearsed. Every spin, deliberate. But there's a wildness in the eyes, something feverish. Behind the masks, these people are starving for touch, for mischief, for a break in the routine of exaggerated politeness and silently judged posture. That's when he appears. A man in a mask of black velvet and gold trim. No title, no name, just a confident stride and a refusal to be introduced. He moves through the crowd like a shadow with excellent taste. Whispers follow. Some say he's a prince from Spain. Others insist he's a disgraced noble in disguise. A few mutter that he's the Queen's cousin's tailor's brother. Everyone agrees he dances too well to be trustworthy. He takes the hand of a masked lady in crimson, a gown with a train long enough to double as a diplomatic insult. They dance. You watch them spin. Her skirts flare dangerously near your flame. The cherub below you groans internally. Closer, closer. There. She dips, and her sleeve grazes your heat. Your flame flutters. You scream inside. A single thread sizzles for a split second, the scent of singed silk rising like a ghost of what could have been. But no fire. Not tonight. She doesn't even notice. The dance continues. You drip from the effort of restraint. The night spirals. A minor noble accidentally steps on a violin. Someone mistakes a bishop for a waiter. A mask falls, revealing not scandal, but disappointment. A couple vanishes behind a curtain, then re-emerges as if nothing happened, except for the smudge of lipstick 2 inches off center. Versailles hums with secrets, and still, you burn. You've seen 100 nights like this, but none quite this theatrical. There's something about the masks that lets people become their worst selves with the most elegance. Lies taste sweeter when said in falsetto. Betrayal lands softer when wrapped in velvet. Eventually the music softens. The guests stagger. A few fall asleep mid-curtsy. A goblet crashes. No one reacts. A powdered wig lies forgotten under a piano. You cast a final glow across the room. The masked man is gone. The woman in crimson leans against a column, staring at nothing. Her eyes are damp. She fans herself absent-mindedly. She looks lonely, and you wonder for a moment who she really was. But you'll never know, because the mask, like everything else here, will be gone by morning, just like you. It happens fast. One moment, you're basking in the aftermath of powdered chaos, the masquerade still clinging to the walls in the form of stale perfume and broken shoe buckles, and the next you're airborne. Well, not quite airborne, but you're falling. Here's how it begins. A servant, young and overconfident, probably new, someone who still thinks Versailles is a place of opportunity and not a gilded labyrinth of passive aggression, is clearing candelabra from the ballroom floor. He reaches for your cherub perch. He's juggling too much. His grip slips, the base tilts, you shift, gravity does the rest. In that instant, everything slows. You feel yourself tip. Your wax base, already softened from hours of elegant suffering, slides ever so slightly. You're no longer upright, you're horizontal. You are a flaming stick of wax with velocity and momentum. You are a projectile, a lit, scented accusation hurtling toward legacy furniture and feathered decor. Below you, the floor, polished, waxed, the kind of floor that dares you to fall on it. Beside you, a discarded shawl. Silk, fringed, probably imported, definitely flammable. And around you, the ghosts of Versailles, holding their breath. You hit the ground with a wet splat. Your flame sputters. Waxes, flies. A single scorched thread from the shawl curls into black smoke. For one horrifying second, the room inhales as if about to burst into applause, panic, or both. Then a slipper lands on you. Hard, heavy, desperate. The young servant stomps your flame flat. Once, twice. He crushes you with the force of a man trying to extinguish not just fire but a career-ending incident. The room smells of burned honey and expensive panic. He exhales. Silence. No one screams. No curtains ignite. No Duchess faints dramatically, though one looks like she's considering it. The disaster is averted. You've been snuffed, and no one says thank you. The servant crouches, wipes sweat from his forehead, and picks up what's left of you. A slightly deformed stump of wax, still warm to the touch, with one side now flat and sad. He looks around. No witnesses, save for a half-sentient dog asleep under a piano. He tucks you into a pocket and vanishes behind the tapestries, probably to spend the next hour convincing himself this never happened. You, meanwhile, are left with nothing but the faint smell of near tragedy and the soft guilt of survival. Let's reflect, shall we? You were nearly the cause of Versailles' greatest disaster since Louis tried to explain taxes. You could have gone down in history, not as a symbol of ambience and elegance, but as the accidental match that lit the whole opera on fire. The thought is humbling, because you were so close to being remembered. Not as a fixture, not as background, but as event. You were inches away from fame, infamy, and a footnote in every European textbook. The Great Fire of 1683, ignited by a candle with surprisingly good posture, but instead, you're smudged, half-melted, scuffed, still warm, still here. And here's the real cruelty. The moment doesn't even register. By morning, it will be gone. Forgotten. The scorch mark will be scrubbed, the shawl replaced, the floor repolished, and you'll be really... Yes. Somehow, despite your brush with combustion, you are repurposed. The next afternoon, you are trimmed, reshaped, and placed in a smaller candelabrum. Not decorative, functional. Utility lighting in a hallway used mostly by mid-ranking diplomats and people avoiding eye contact. That's the Versailles way. No rest, no memorial, just reshuffle and relight. So you burn again, this time dimmer, slower, wiser, if such a thing can be said of wax. You remember the sensation of falling, the rush, the freedom, the terrifying possibility of meaning, and then the stamp, the flattening, the snuff. You wonder if any other candles noticed. Maybe the one beside you. Maybe the tall one near the mirror who always flickers with a little extra flare. Did she see? Did she mourn? Or did she just burn on, knowing full well that wax doesn't grieve? It just drips. There's a lesson here. Probably. Something about near misses. About the dignity of uncelebrated survival. About how not all catastrophes explode. Some are just quietly absorbed, stumped out, and swept away. But you're a candle. You don't get to philosophize. You get to glow. That's your job. Burn slow. Light the space. Make it look beautiful, then die, politely. And so, you do. You stand there, half your former height, wick trimmed short, light still flickering, a survival with no medal, a witness to your own almost glory, and somehow, that has to be enough. Midnight at Versailles is not quiet. It is simply less loud. The music has stopped, yes. The laughter has faded. The mincing shoes have wandered back to their chambers. But the palace never really sleeps. It just exhales slowly, decadently, like a lion digesting its third meal. You, of course, are still burning. Barely. You are no longer a stately column of noble wax. You are a slumped, deformed reminder of earlier glory, a misshapen glow, with a crooked lean and a wick that whistles when the air shifts wrong. You are half a candle, core to the grace, and still expected to illuminate a 5-foot stretch of hallway as though your spine weren't collapsing like flan in a drawer. Welcome to your late shift. Your surroundings are humble now. A side corridor near the servants' staircase, a place where nobles do not pass unless hopelessly lost or deeply ashamed. The air is still, thick with wax and lemon oil. A broom leans in the corner. A painting of someone's great-aunt watches everything with dust-frosted contempt. It smells like damp stone and forgotten soap. And yet, even here, you glow. Your flame casts shadows on the walls. Tall, trembling shapes that waver like memories you haven't earned. You flicker across worn wood and tired stone, and the back of a servant asleep on a bench, snoring softly into his folded arms. His name is Thomas. You've never met, but he sleeps beside your light every night. You know the rhythm of his breath. You know the way he twitches when he dreams. Sometimes he mumbles names. Sometimes he cries. You burn a little brighter for him, just in case. Midnight thoughts come slowly, like wax down the side of your body, thick, deliberate, and slightly sad. You think of Pierre. Your wick stirs at the memory. He hasn't come by since the masquerade. Maybe reassigned? Maybe dismissed? Maybe just hiding in the scullery, wondering what a person does when they realize they're only ever called upon when something breaks. You miss the way he talked to you like you mattered, like you were more than furniture. You think of the hall of mirrors, of chandeliers and perfumes, of duchesses laughing like birds in silk cages. You used to burn for them. Now you light broom closets and cracked tile. And yet, your flame is softer here, kinder. Let that sink in. What is a candle, if not a quiet observer of everyone else's urgency? You saw a king eat soup like it was a religious rite. You saw nobles disguise cruelty in compliments. You saw a duchess stare into your light, as though it knew something about her she couldn't name. And none of them remember you. But Thomas does. Every night when he wakes, he squints at your flame. Not in awe, not in poetry, but with relief. You are still there. He hasn't overslept. The world hasn't ended. Wax means time. Flame means order. You, half melted and barely upright, are the only clock that still ticks in this forgotten hallway. So yeah, breathe that in, dust and all. You think about the bees. Those tireless, furious little architects who made your wax, unaware their life's work would end in fire. Were they grateful? Do bees dream of warmth, of sweetness, or just survival? You wonder what's sweeter, a long, slow burn in a beautiful room, or a quiet flicker beside someone who needs you. A rat scurries past. You do not judge. At Versailles everyone scurries, some in silk, some in shadows. The difference is mostly laundry. Your wax pool is shallow now. One more hour, maybe two. The flame flutters. The shadows grow longer, softer, almost gentle. Thomas stirs. He yawns, shifts, resettles. His arm brushes your light. He doesn't wake, but he smiles. And just like that, it's worth it. Not the glamour, not the chandelier fantasies, not the momentary nod from a king who only saw his own reflection. No, this small moment in a servant's hallway where your flicker becomes comfort, where your melt means nothing to everyone, except one person. So you burn, not as centerpiece, not as spectacle, but as presence. Quiet, steady, and almost invisible. And if anyone's still watching, if anyone out there is listening to this slow melting monologue, then maybe you know the feeling of being useful but unseen, of holding light while slowly fading, of glowing anyway. Still watching? Then you get it. You've burned too. There's a certain kind of silence that only happens at 2 a.m. in Versailles. It's not peace, not rest. It's the silence of a palace, caught between one performance and the next. The guests are asleep. The servants are halfway through their dreaming. The ghosts, and there are ghosts, this is France, walk the halls politely, not wanting to disturb the linen. And you? You're still burning. Barely. Your wax is low. Your bass is soft. Your wick is fraying like a violin string on its final bow. You glow faintly in the servant hallway, casting dim shadows that twitch like memories. You know it's coming. The end. Not dramatic, not sudden, just scheduled. The snuffer. You've heard it before. The soft, metallic clink of inevitability. A bell-shaped tool held by a hand that never hesitates. It doesn't matter who the servant is, their faces blur over time, but their purpose. Crystal. You hear the footsteps now. Soft. Unhurried. The sound of someone who has extinguished more light than they've ever created. He rounds the corner. Tall, pale, anonymous. Wearing the same livery they all wear, holding the same tool. The snuffer, blunt, cold, efficient. A device built for the sole purpose of ending things neatly, silencing light, trimming formality, turning glow into smoke. He sees you. You don't flinch. You don't flicker. You stand as tall as your stubby half-body allows, and try to burn just a little brighter. One final stand, one last gasp of relevance before being erased from the furniture of existence. The servant lifts the tool, but he hesitates. Just for a moment. He looks at you, not through you, with something like pause, reflection, maybe recognition. Perhaps he's thinking about the last time he saw your flame. Or maybe he's just tired, too. It's late. He's snuffed hundreds of candles tonight. What's one more? You want to say something, not beg, not plead. Just say something. Acknowledge the moment. Ask, quietly, did I glow well? But there's no mouth, no voice, only the steady hiss of wax and the sound of breathing that isn't yours. And then darkness. The bell drops. The flame vanishes. You are no more. The room doesn't notice. Thomas doesn't stir. The rats don't pause. The ghost of Madame de Maintenon continues her midnight wanderings without interruption. The hallway accepts your absence like it accepts the silence, fully, quickly, and without question. The servant doesn't linger. He moves on, snuffing the next candle, and the next, just another cog in the great extinguishing. You lie there, still warm. Your wick smoulders faintly for half a breath, then stills. Your wax cools, hardens, congeals into a lopsided disk of effort and memory. It's done. You are extinguished. Not honored. Not remembered. Just replaced. In fact, yes, there it is. The fresh candle, already unpacked from its velvet-lined box. Slightly taller, slightly straighter, whispering beeswax perfection. A new wick, unburned, clean, ready, ambitious. You hate it a little. It doesn't know what's coming. The melting, the gossip, the noble farts, the late-night arguments about oranges, the drips, the danger, the dance with near ignition, the loneliness of being useful and invisible. No, it just stands there, smug in its freshness, waiting to be lit. You were like that once. and now you're just cooling wax on a brass dish. But here's the strange thing. You don't feel cheated. Not really, because for all the burning, all the dripping, all the endless flickering in rooms filled with people who didn't notice, someone did. A servant, a sleeping boy, a noble's passing glance, the queen's dog sniffing you before sneezing. Moments. Tiny, stupid, human moments. And in those, you lived. You were more than wax. You were witness, companion, evident, a part of something greater than yourself, even if no one ever said thank you. So when your final puff of heat fades, and you join the others in the cooling stillness of the palace, you do so quietly, without fanfare, without regret. You burned. You glowed. And in that last flicker before the snuffer dropped, you felt legendary. You thought it was over, and honestly, it should have been. Extinguished. Hardened. Done. You served your time. You burned with grace. You melted with dignity. You faced the snuffer with the same stoic pride as any candle, hoping not to go out in a draft-induced accident. But no. Apparently being extinguished isn't the end. Because here you are, scraped from a sconce by a servant with a blunt knife. And no sympathy. Your remains, still warm, slightly concave, vaguely noble, are dropped unceremoniously into a bucket with other waxy leftovers. You land on someone's shoulder, possibly a cousin, hard to say. It's undignified. The bucket smells like endings, wax ghosts, failed burns. You lie among puddles and chunks, slumped beside a stump that reeks faintly of tallow, and someone who still carries the faint whiff of clove. You don't talk. Candles don't talk. But the silence is heavy, shared, understood. Then comes the heat. You are melted down. Not metaphorically. Literally. You are dumped into a giant cauldron, stirred with a paddle by a man whose only facial expression is mild contempt. Your edges disappear. Your shape is erased. You become liquid again. The great undo. It's oddly peaceful. You lose the burden of form. You stop being that candle. You are now wax. Pure, without title or wick. You swirl with others, in a bubbling bath of former glory, a noble blend of ballroom residue, hallway burnout, and kitchen misfires. Together, you simmer. Then the mold. They pour you into it, without ceremony. A fresh cast, shaped like a cherub's butt. Yes, a cherub's butt. Apparently the Queen has commissioned new candelabra, a series of decorative infants balancing on scrollwork, their waxy rears protruding skyward to support the actual candle. And you, dear soul, are poured into one of them. This is your afterlife. You dry. You cool. You harden. Again. But this time with curves you never asked for. Gone is your stately taper. Now you are a plump cherubic rump destined to cradle another candle, a wickless cradle. A literal supporting role. You're placed in a crate, delivered to a chamber filled with furniture too delicate to sit on, and curtains that cost more than a village. The craftsman polishes your cheeks with beeswax and sighs. Too many butts, he mutters. You don't glow anymore. You don't flicker. You endure. And yet, there is something in this. A new kind of meaning. Not front and center, not flame forward, but foundational. You support the next candle. You lift it, position it, offer it a pedestal. You are what keeps it from wobbling, from falling, from melting into disgrace. There is grace in being the thing no one sees but everyone needs. Still, the irony isn't lost on you. You used to be the main event, the illumination. Now you are the literal backside of a lighting solution. You were once applauded, quietly, in flickers, by the reflections of kings. Now you face the underside of a taper whose wick hasn't even been trimmed yet. But then, one evening, something happens. A lady, young, curious, bored, walks past the sconce. She glances up, tilts her head. That cherub looks sad, she says. Her friend laughs. It's just a candle holder. But the first lady lingers. She stares, not mockingly, just thoughtfully. She sees something. Not you, exactly, but a flicker of what you were. The remnants of heat. The memory of light. A shape that hints at a story. And for a brief second, you feel like more than furniture. You feel remembered. Not by name, not as a hero, but as presence, as something once warm. And that's enough. You don't need applause. You don't need another ballroom. You had your moment. You burned brightly. You faded well. And now, you hold others as they burn. Let that sink in. The wax is not gone. It just changes shape. Flame is not lost. It's passed on. Somewhere in the distance, a quartet plays something soft. The new candle above you flickers in time. You hold steady. You don't get the spotlight anymore, but you still have a part to play. And maybe in the quiet support of another's glow, you found your real purpose. You were born to burn, but reborn to carry. Time passes. And when we say passes, we don't mean gracefully strolls down a gilded hallway with powdered hair and a fan. We mean it crashes through like an uninvited dinner guest. Loud, clumsy, and entirely uninterested in preserving your decor. The court is gone. The wigs, powdered into extinction. The nobles, buried or beheaded. The scandals, now reduced to footnotes in tour guide pamphlets that smell like lemon-scented laminate. Versailles still stands, technically, but it's not alive anymore. No more minuet music. No more velvet tantrums. No more candles burned down to trembling puddles during secret affairs. Now, it's a museum. And here you are. Not the same candle, of course. You're long gone. Melted, recast, burned again. Forgotten. But something of you remains. A smudge on the mirror. A stain in the brass. A memory in the marrow of the palace walls. You were part of the flame, and flame, once given, echoes. Tourists shuffle through the hall of mirrors now, their sneakers squeaking sacrilege against parquet floors. They snap photos, they whisper facts they misremember from high school. A child asks if kings had iPhones, and occasionally, in the stillness between guided monologues, someone pauses. Do you smell that? It's faint. Beeswax. Smoke. Maybe memory. Maybe nothing. They look around. The lights overhead are electric now. Efficient. Soulless. Their glow is consistent, cold, uninterested in drama. They cast no flicker, no mystery, no heat, but still, that scent, a whiff of warmth, a trace of something older. No one can explain it. There are no real candles allowed in Versailles anymore. Fire hazard. Liability. Insurance doesn't cover centuries-old parquet floor consumed by rogue nostalgia. So the smell, it shouldn't be there. But it is, sometimes, just enough to make someone wonder. Just enough to make someone feel something they can't quite place. And maybe, that's you. Not literally. Your wax is long gone. Discarded, recycled, forgotten, in a ditch beside other melted monarchies. But your glow, your service, your little flicker of heat in a vast, cold palace, that lives on. Maybe in the shape of a tour guide's pause when they reach the Hall of Mirrors. Maybe in the way a visitor lingers near a sconce, even though it holds nothing but a dead LED bulb. Maybe in the way a child squints at a chandelier and asks, "Did it used to be alive?" They're not wrong. You were alive, in your way. You burned beside kings and paupers. You lit the faces of poets and politicians, lovers and liars. You witnessed grandeur and nonsense, betrayal and boredom, morning breath and midnight plotting. You were there, flickering, silent, steady, and no one thanked you. That's fine. Candles don't burn for applause. They burn because someone needs to see. They burn for the letter being written, for the hallway being crossed, for the secrets that can't wait until morning. And even now, in a palace dressed up as history's dollhouse, there's still something of you here, in the shimmer on the mirror, in the smell that shouldn't be, in the light that's gone, but not forgotten. A custodian walks through late at night, alone, sweeping up confetti from some corporate gala that rented out the same rooms where kings once dined. She moves quietly, respectfully, like she knows she's not alone. She doesn't speak, but she pauses at the window, looks out over the gardens, the fountains, the stone paths once trod by powdered men with fragile egos. She sighs, then turns back, and for a moment catches her reflection in the glass. There, for half a second, a flicker, behind her, in the mirror. A flame. She turns. Nothing. Just darkness. But she smiles, because maybe she imagined it, or maybe, just maybe, you burned again. One last time. Just to remind the world, you were here. You mattered. You glowed. And even in a world of cold, bright efficiency, the memory of your warmth still lingers. You thought this story was about you. And to be fair, it kind of was. You were the main character. The one lit. The one extinguished. The one who got front row seats to court drama, to noble collapses and awkward flirtations, to roast pheasants consumed beneath your flickering halo. But you weren't alone. Not really. Because behind every candle is a cast of quiet, invisible lives. The kind history doesn't write about. The kind who didn't get portraits painted, or busts carved, or salons named in their honor. They were the ones who touched you, carried you, cleaned your mess when you wept wax all over silk. They were the background, but they were everything. Start with the beekeepers, out in the fields, thick with buzzing and stings and smoke, tending to the hives so that nobility could have light that didn't smell like roast beef. They worked sunburned and soot-covered, harvesting golden wax from furious bees with all the ceremony of unpaid alchemists. They never saw Versailles, but Versailles burned on their backs. Then there were the chandlers, the candle makers. Usually middle-aged men with soot in their fingernails and eyes like they'd seen some things. You were moulded by one. You remember the press of his fingers, the way he trimmed your base with a small curved knife. His name might have been Luc, or Jacques, or Pierre, always Pierre. He didn't say much, but he hummed. He sang little songs while shaping you, songs with no lyrics. Just tunes, the kind only passed down when no one's writing anything down. His hands were cracked, his apron stained, but he made you beautiful, even if you were destined to melt. And then, the servant. You were handled more by servants than kings, lit by them, snuffed by them, balanced by shaking hands as they tiptoed through Versailles with trays of you in ornate holders, praying not to trip on loose rugs or spill hot wax on brocade. They worked long before the nobles rose and long after they slept. Some of them had names no one bothered to remember. Girls with calloused hands, boys with thin wrists and hollow cheeks. One of them, maybe 16, used to whisper to you before lighting you. Just small nothings. A ritual. Maybe it calmed her. Maybe she thought it made you burn steadier. It did. There was a footman who spoke to candles like they were his comrades. "There we go, old friend," he'd say, striking the flint. "Time to illuminate the idiots." You liked him. He once caught you mid-fall, risked a royal scolding just to keep you from shattering. That night, you burned a little brighter. There was also the girl in the Queen's chamber. She lit you only during thunderstorms, when the Queen couldn't sleep. The girl was scared of lightning too, though she'd never admit it. But you saw the way her fingers shook on the match. You gave her light. She gave you purpose. You never forgot her. And beyond the staff, the nobility. Yes, they were ridiculous, perfumed and powdered and prone to fainting. But even they had moments of softness. A marquise who lit you beside her bed, and read letters from a soldier long since lost. A countess who used your flame to write poetry no one would ever see. One night, a child, someone's niece, probably, snuck into the gallery and sat beneath your light with a stuffed rabbit and a piece of stolen cake. She talked to you for nearly an hour about stars and ghosts, and why grown-ups were dumb. You agreed. She fell asleep beside you, curled on a bench. You kept watch. And then there was the artist. He came late one evening, dragging a canvas the size of a small horse. He lit you with reverence, adjusted your position 6 times. You watched him sketch by your glow, paint, smudge, curse, fix, whisper apologies to the face he was painting. You never saw the final product, but you'd like to believe it turned out well. All of them, the beekeeper, the candle maker, the servant, the noble, the artist, the child, their lives brushed yours. Fleetingly, softly, but real. And now? Their names erased, stories unwritten. But you remember, you were there. You saw the quiet sighs, the small rebellions, the whispered prayers and unspoken dreams. You weren't just melted wax. You were witness. You were warm. And that matters. It still does. Because even now, centuries later, long after your wick's last ember vanished, you carry their ghosts. Not in a haunting way, more like an echo, a warmth that lingers in the walls. A hush in the air, a flicker, not of flame, but of memory. So, yeah, let that sink in. You thought this story was yours, but it never really was. You were one light among many. One spark in a palace of shadows, and you weren't alone. Here it is. The end. No trumpet, no curtain call, just a puff of smoke where light used to be. You were made to vanish. You knew that from the beginning, from the moment molten wax met mold and some chain-smoking craftsman muttered, "This one's for the Hall of Mirrors." You had an expiration date. Still, you gave what you had. A slow surrender, inch by inch, drip by drip, melting for a palace that would never thank you, dimming so someone else could glow. And yet, you'd do it again, because in that flicker of time, that brief, burning life, you mattered. Not just to the kings and the powdered aristocrats playing dress-up in gold leaf, but to the silent hands, the quiet watchers, the people who saw your light, even if they never saw you. You made shadows dance. You made secrets visible. You made cold rooms feel just a little warmer. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's everything. In a world obsessed with staying lit forever, with LED bulbs and backup generators and going viral, you were the opposite. You were finite. You were fragile. You were fleeting. And that's what made you beautiful. There was no safety net, no dimmer switch, no second try. You got one shot, one wick, one chance to burn, and burn well. And somehow, maybe your flame wasn't the biggest in the room. Maybe you didn't get the chandelier slot, or the throne room, or that dramatic spotlight on the king's wig during speeches. But you still gave light, still stood steady when the windows rattled, when the rumours flew, when the Duchess wept quietly behind her fan. You were a constant. A small one, sure, but steady. And now you're gone, melted, extinguished, replaced. Your last curl of smoke vanished into velvet, but even in absence, there's memory. The scent of beeswax in an empty hall, the shape of a melted pool still carved into the wood grain, the faintest scorch mark on a candelabrum no one ever quite polishes away. These are your footprints, and in a way, you outlasted everyone. Louis XIV, dust in a crypt, his court, reduced to plaques and tragic reenactments. The palace, a tourist trap with audio guides and bottled water. But you still felt, not always noticed, not always named, but felt. Because there's a power in burning quietly, in showing up, in giving warmth, even when no one's looking. And yeah, you burned out. You sagged. You puddled. You became a warped memory of yourself. You gave until you had nothing left. That's what burnout is. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. Because you made something beautiful. Even if it was temporary. Even if no one remembers. Even if you only lit one letter, one look, one whispered, "I love you," between stolen glances at a masquerade ball. That was enough. That was everything. And if you had the chance, you'd do it all again. Drip by drip. Moment by moment. Light by light. Not for the applause. Not for the glory. But for the glow. For the chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. Even just for a moment. And that's the thing, isn't it? We're all candles. Some burn fast. Some slow. Some sputter out in a gust of wind they never saw coming. But while we're lit, we glow. We give what we can. We burn as best we're able. And maybe, just maybe, that's it. So, here's to you. To the candle that lit Versailles. To the wax that bore witness. To the silent flame that made history flicker. Burnout? Sure. You had that coming from the start. But worth it? Absolutely. Because even in the dark, there's still warmth where you were. Still silence. Remembering your hum. Still someone, somewhere, feeling just a little less alone because once, you burned. So rest now. You've earned it. And for those of us still burning, we carry your glow. One breath at a time. One flicker forward. Until we too go quiet. And leave behind just enough warmth. Still here? You just spent 17,000 words living as a piece of melting wax. That deserves a reward. Tap subscribe, light a safe candle, and let history burn softly in your dreams. Because even the quietest lives, flickering, fading, glowing, have a story worth telling, even if they're made of wax.